Hi, and welcome to Filmmakers Compass Podcast, a show where we talk about movies and, well, more movies. I'm D-Man, joined by CP. CP, how are you doing today?
Dude, I am so psyched that you are back on this podcast, and I'm excited about this episode.
Yes, it's great to be back, so thank you. And we do have a very special episode in store, which we're going to get to in a minute. But yeah, I mean, it's great to be back podcasting because, the episode that I was last on was us talking about Endgame and Justice League. And lo and behold, you and I cannot talk about those movies for under an hour. It's just impossible. So we split it in two, a part A, part B. And you went ahead and did a great solo episode a week ago. So thank you for holding down the fort. Really appreciate it. And yeah, it's great to be back. So looking forward to what we're going to talk about this week, which again is pretty exciting. All right. Well, before we get into those topics, though, let's go ahead and do our shout outs per the usual. So first up, I have to give a big congratulations to Liz and Rudy, who got married last week. Congratulations, guys, and happy 1 week anniversary. Yes, that's incredible. I want to give a birthday shout out to my good buddy Gus, who we actually went to Puerto Vallarta to go celebrate his birthday. And I had a great time, CP. Way too much tequila, I'll tell you that.
Well, that's not surprising in any way, but I'm glad you made it back.
I did also get to hug a sea lion. That was pretty cool.
I don't think it was cool for the sea lion.
He was in Mexico having a great time.
Also drinking some tequila.
Yeah, he had his own private pool. I mean, it was pretty dope. It looked like he lives a good life. So I also want to give a congrats to Connor, who shared some updates from his time on set this weekend. I don't know if you had a chance to see that or if he sent you any direct messages, but it looked like he had a great time filming a film out in the Midwest.
With Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, and it looks like it's a period piece or at the very least a comedy. I don't know. He didn't tell me any details about the movie, but he did message us and said that it was an amazing time. So Connor, that's awesome. Always love hearing about people on set and making movies. So that's incredible. Weinzettel messaged us after you posted on social media and said that his favorite Batman movie is 1989, which that's fair. I mean, I know which one I like the most, and that'll probably come up later in this episode, but yeah, 1989 is phenomenal, and that's not a bad choice at all. Ben Hall messaged us and said that Batman Begins is the best of the trilogy, just a hair better than The Dark Knight. It's so focused on Bruce Wayne, phenomenal. So, Ben, thank you so much for messaging us. I am going to disagree here. I do think The Dark Knight is superior, and that's just personal opinion and being completely objective. Batman Begins is awesome. You actually had a chance to see it in the theater. They were doing like an AMC deals, flashback movie or something. How was that?
It was for Batman Day this past weekend, Saturday the 16th, and it was awesome, dude. I have not seen Batman Begins in the theater since it premiered
2005.
Yeah, so I was like, I have to go see it again. I wanted to go see The Dark Knight after it. They actually showed all the Nolan trilogy, but there's no good reason not to go. But I figured I've seen it 10 times. I didn't need to go for an 11th. I was probably okay.
It's fair. Well, I mean, it's cool you got to see on the big screen. Like, there's so many movies if they brought back, I would totally go, particularly Star Wars. I would be there in a heartbeat. I did go see Return of the Jedi this year, so I can't complain. There is that. Next up on our shoutouts is actually Ivor, who appeared like you and him had a really long conversation in the DMs here, but he had a comment for you. Good solo episode, CP. I don't have a full list, but he said, number 1, Lawrence of Arabia is slow at times, but the big screen vistas of the desert, voila. And then he said, number 2, 10 minutes into Master and Commander on the big screen TV made me say to myself that I should have seen this in the theaters. And also, I love all the Nolan films, but I would have chosen Inception. So, which is also, Nolan has so many good movies. It's crazy. His filmography is just awesome. Yeah, I bet Warner Brothers is kicking themselves right now. They didn't get Oppenheimer. Yeah, and you guys go on. You have, there's quite a conversation here in the comments. So, Ivor, thank you so much, man. Always appreciate your insights. And I did want to give you a personal shout out because I actually saw Terry and Adam. And they mentioned you, and they said they would love to hear the podcast if we get you on as a guest, which I think we're going to try and make that happen. I know you and I talked
that happen.
Yeah, we talked at one time, Ivor, about possibly doing it probably a few months back, but we still would love to do that. And your insights and discussion are just so much fun. So we love it. I hope you love it. And thanks. And then I got to give a big shout out, CP, to Steph, my wife, for just being beautiful and lovely. She's amazing. She's also like half sleeping right here, and she's looking at me right now. Like, so yeah, there's that. So love you, babe. Well, CP, that does it for our shout outs this week. But now it's time for our big announcement and why this episode is so special. This is episode number 100. 100. We have done it. We have officially reached 3 digits. And it's been quite a ride. It's been phenomenal and fun, and we've run into tons of technical difficulties, and this show has taken on many different iterations over the course of that 100 episodes. But
that is true.
How do you feel?
I feel good, dude. I didn't know.
No, I mean about 100.
Make it to 100. I didn't think we'd make it here.
Well, now I think we're going to make it to 1,000.
I mean, I don't know that I want to take that bet, but I love the optimism.
I mean, 52 weeks in a year, that would be quite a few years, but that will aim high. We'll set the bar all the way. We'll go to 4 digits. That's the goal.
All right, let's do it. I like it.
Yeah, well, I did want to talk a little bit. It's funny, if you look back at our show and you go back to like episode 1, this podcast actually started off slightly different than what it is now, right? Our intro is, movies and more movies. But back in the day, we actually were interviewing guests, and we were talking a lot more about filmmaking, which is probably where the name Filmmakers Compass is derived. Yeah. But, the show was very interview focused, and it was very much about the industry and the
getting
business.
Into the industry, like what people don't necessarily know when they started. And that was really how we were starting out with this show. That was our initial concept.
Yeah, and it was a blast, having people on. It's funny because we did not record those as video podcasts. We only recorded audio at that time. And it was interesting because we actually did all of those episodes in person. Yeah. So, where now we're usually recording over Zoom, there's, some lag issues and different things that affect the show. But back then, yeah, we actually met up downtown LA, and,
we were recording in our friend's studio, and it was cool. You'd see all the exciting parts of downtown LA every time. And we were in the middle of an episode, people fighting, and our guests, cop cars going by. It was great.
Our guests actually came in person. It's crazy because, yeah, at that time, we don't think about that now. Like if we were to have guests on, Ivor, if you get a chance to come on, which would be amazing, we would probably be doing it over a Zoom call versus, back in the day, we actually used to meet up. You have a full podcast setup. You have a board and everything.
Yeah. I used to take people out for lunch. Like it was a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. Well, I did want to just give an acknowledgement to all of our guests because, you guys each helped, get us to 100 episodes, and we really appreciate it. So that's Kurt, Daniel, Harrison, Aaron, Nick, Mike, Brad, and Greg. So thank you guys so much. It was so much fun having you on the show, hearing a little bit about, your history and, how you got into the industry and got in, acquired your love for filmmaking and films. And it was so much fun. It's actually interesting because when I was traveling the last couple of weeks, I did put on the podcast and I went back to those early episodes just to reminisce, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Thank you guys. And then, of course, CP, while we're talking about, 100 episodes and going back in time here, we also want to acknowledge all of our super fans. So to everybody that tunes in every week, we really appreciate you guys and, hope you enjoy the podcast. But, there are people that, do engage with us usually weekly, but I mean, at least once a month, right? People are tuning in and sending us comments or, saying something on maybe our social media videos or different things. So we, love all that engagement. And it's one of the reasons why we even do the podcast, because we love to talk about movies and we love to talk movies with you guys. So some of those people are Ivor, Drucker, Jazzy, our moms, Connor, Lindsay, Brad, Samboy, Gary, Brian, James Holden, Jack, D-Bex, and Winezettel. So we just wanted to give all of you, a little nod here because we just appreciate you guys so much. And if there's anybody that I did miss, I apologize. But honestly, everybody that tunes in, it's funny when you're doing a show and, when you first start out, right? We started at 0, we didn't bring a following with us or anything. And you don't know if anybody's listening on the other end. Well, now we know, and we have so much fun. And it's one of the reasons that, we get excited about doing the show each week. So we appreciate all you guys. Thank you. So, and then CP, I wanted to acknowledge, we used to do segmented shows. We used to do, at one time, the show morphed into us actually reviewing and breaking down individual films.
Yeah, I know.
Which those segments live on, but they live on as segments. And those are movie remake time. And what was the other one, CP?
Total Rewind.
Total Rewind, which I love. I love Total Rewind. So yeah, those were really fun. And obviously we got to watch a lot of movies. At that time, we were literally watching movies for the podcast every week. I think I was even live tweeting, some of the movies. I would put them on and just live tweet as I was watching the movies, which was fun too. It's a little different. I think if I were to do live tweeting again, I would definitely try to set it up so people were more aware, because, it's not like people are checking Twitter to check my account to see if I'm live tweeting. You'd have to just catch it in your timeline. But, if I was to do it again, I'd be like, all right, guys, I'm going to watch, Batman 89 at 8 p.m. on Tuesday. If you guys want to,
he does that on pretty much every Tuesday. So just hop on social if you want to be a part of that.
But that might be fun, set up like a watch time and put a movie on. Like, that could be pretty cool. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe we'll do that for the future. And then, we kind of evolved the show into where it's at now, which, we do have multiple segments, and we have topics that change from week to week, but we just talk movies, anything movies. It's, whatever tickles our fancy, right? We got to talk about that. It's usually the way I always think of, like, how do the topics make our podcast? I always think, what are the topics that I would be compelled to call you to talk about it? Yeah. There's announcements. There's a movie that I saw. Like, I think I called you and we talked for like 20 minutes about, I went and saw Blue Beetle this week, which is actually really good. You and I both agreed on that. And I went in still kind of, not expecting much, and then being slightly surprised. It's a movie that has heart. It's a movie that has a great theme about family. And even though I think the storyline and some of the things are pretty par for the course for comic book movies, it's an origin story. The plot's pretty stock. The characters are memorable. I thought the chemistry between the actors was great, and it was so much fun. But yeah, I had to call you. I was like, oh man, I got to call CP and talk about this. Or like, Apple released the Vision Pro, and we're like, I got to call you. Like, what is this about? It's fun now, because a lot of those conversations, instead of maybe calling you, I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk to CP about this on the podcast for sure.
Then everyone gets to be a part of it.
Yeah. And then sometimes I do call you. Sometimes I'm still like, hey, I got to talk to you about this like right now. So, I still think one of the craziest things is that over the course of these 100 episodes, you still have not seen Disney Star Wars.
Nope.
So,
and hopefully by the time we get through 1,000 episodes, I will not have seen it then either.
Well, hopefully Disney Star Wars will be so awesome that you will have to see it just out of its sheer awesomeness. But, don't hold your breath. So I don't know. They're doing some cool stuff. I can't really talk about Ahsoka because the show's not over, but they are doing some cool things. And I think we had an episode maybe 3 months ago where I had talked about what I would like to see for the future of Star Wars, and they might be going there. So that's interesting. Kind of hope it happens.
Fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed.
So, and then the future of the podcast, for the next 900 episodes, is hopefully we will be bringing some guests on. I'm sure the segments will change. I mean, we've fluctuated with varying run times. Sometimes we would do total remake time. It might be like a 30-minute episode, but you and I have talked, and it's gotten as high as an hour something.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see what the future holds, but the show has been evolving since episode 1 to now, and I expect it to continue to evolve as we keep the discussions going.
And it depends on what our, awesome listeners say. When you give us your feedback, D-Man and I try to incorporate it and change the show as you suggest. So if you have ideas for segments or what you'd like to see in the next 900 episodes, as D-Man said, let us know, and we will do our best to oblige.
All right. Well, CP, now I'm going to throw it over to you. We have a kind of a fun topic for, a 100th episode that we're going to get into, which is, well, go ahead and explain it.
Well, we were thinking movies have obviously been around for a really long time, but let's go back 100 years. What was cinema like at that time? Now, I love watching old films. I know you do too, but I don't watch a lot of films from the 20s and specifically 1923. So I did a little digging, and there's a lot that I didn't even realize from the year. Because think about this. The Academy Awards started in 1929. So 23 is 6 years before that. The first movie with sound, the first talkie picture, was The Jazz Singer in 1925. So this is back in the silent picture era. 100 years from today, these are silent flicks.
Okay, yeah, that's a totally different movie going experience. Now, theaters were around though, right? You could still, that's how you went and saw movies, right? It was a theater experience.
Yeah, and remember, and I think we're a lot of times under the assumption that silent movies were totally silent, but they weren't. They were typically accompanied with an organist or an entire quartet of musicians playing music along with the silent films, but there was no actual dialogue, right? You had to read. So Matt Hilson would have really hated these movies.
Throw that text up on the screen. Let us know what you're thinking.
So 1923. So I did a little digging back, and crazy. Do you know what the highest grossing film from that year actually is?
No, I have no clue. I couldn't even probably name you a movie from 1923 knowingly. Like, I'd be guessing.
Well, these are some of the most successful movies of the time. Tiger Rose, The Gold Diggers, Main Street, The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Main Street, is that Charlie Chaplin?
I believe that actually is. The Covered Wagon, but the highest grossing film of the year, The Ten Commandments from 1923, directed by Cecil B. DeMille. Now, if you're a little confused, Cecil B. DeMille also remade The Ten Commandments in 1956 when they had sound and color.
Yeah, which I was going to say, I was like, The Ten Commandments I'm thinking of is that version, the color version where he like parts the water. And fun fact, did you know that the cameras that were used for The Ten Commandments were the exact same cameras that were repurposed for ILM and the special effects for the original Star Wars movie?
That is pretty sweet. I did not know that. But did you know this? Cecil B. DeMille's 1923 Ten Commandments was actually a film made partially in color.
I did not know that. I didn't even know they had that option.
We are calling it partial color because at the time, the film was shot in Technicolor Process 2. Now, this is like technical, boring history of film stuff, but Technicolor Process 2 was actually a camera lens that, aside from the black and white negative it was collecting, it was collecting color in two colors, red and green.
Oh, so they didn't have blue yet.
Yeah, so actually the sequence at the time of the parting of the Red Sea was actually the sequence that they pulled out all their tricks here and shot in Process 2. Now, once we get to Process 3, that's when we start getting what we're more familiar with. Some of the stuff I talked about on the last episode, like, 1939, The Wizard of Oz. So This is actually a kind of a big deal. The other very interesting thing about this film, this is one of the first films that we've ever actually seen the expiration of copyrights bring this into the public domain.
Really? Okay. So this is actually, anybody can take this and repurpose it or whatever they need.
In 2019, this film entered public domain because it met the expiration of the U.S. copyright law, which we are obviously going to see many more films doing it, but I just thought that was kind of ironic, seeing as 1923 was the year we're talking about, and this is one of the first films to enter public domain because of a copyright expert.
That's pretty neat.
Did I tell you what the highest grossing film, The Ten Commandments, made in 1923?
No, let's hear it.
$4 million and 169,000.
Wow, just $4 million in 1923 is actually probably pretty good.
Yeah,
like that's a lot of money. Like, I don't know. I'd have to see what it is adjusted for inflation, but I'm guessing that's not bad.
Well, let me tell you this: when it lists the highest grossing films of the time, number 10 on that list is a film called Tiger Rose, and it's notable for making $466,000. So, just so you know, apparently that 4 million was actually a very big deal by comparison.
Yeah, I would take 4 million today, but
So
1923, I imagine $4 million went very far.
A few things that are of note in the year 1923 as they affected Hollywood. So, number one, on April 4th, Warner Brothers Picture was incorporated.
Wow.
Yep.
Welcome to the studio system.
Yep. Also, October 16th, Walt and Roy Disney established Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio, which would become Walt Disney Pictures.
Interesting. Also, 23 was a big year.
Two of the biggest, right?
Wow. That's pretty cool,
though. This is also kind of a more obscure fact. Harry Rosslam did the film Les Après-Midi. It was released, and it was actually the first French film to use matte paintings. So that was the introduction of matte technology into French cinema. Obviously, French cinema has been influential in cinema. And for the longest time, matte work was a very big deal in Hollywood. And matte workers were actually paid very well because it was such an essential production tool.
I watched a YouTube video on just matte paintings and how they work. And it was funny because they used a bunch of examples when you go back in time. And I was like, I had no idea that these are like, literally like it's paintings, and then only like, you know, a very small 10% of the frame is the actual like film itself movement. You know, and to be honest, I'm shocked at how good matte paintings actually work. Like, to me, if I'm thinking about how that would actually work, my guess is that when you would line it all up, like, you'd always be able to tell where the matte lines and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the film is, but it looks shockingly good, like quite amazing. I was very impressed. So, I mean, I guess it got essentially replaced with just like blue screens and green screens, right?
Yeah.
And now they just digitally do it. I mean, it's still a painting. I mean, it's just a different tool, I guess. But
I think it's something we kind of forget about because, again, they were using this in the 20s, and we use matte technology up until the 80s pretty regularly.
God, Star Wars looks amazing. Original trilogy matte paintings. I mean, it's crazy, dude. Like, I saw one of the examples was actually in Empire Strikes Back. It was when the Falcon is on the landing pad of Cloud City. And apparently all of that is a matte painting, except for the bottom portion of the Falcon with the ramp. And then it literally, it extends out to the walkway where Lando and all his men and everything walk in, and the rest of it is all a painting. And I was like, that's incredible. Yeah, I don't know. Matte paintings are just fascinating because I'm like, I can't believe like someone literally sat and like painted on glass.
So yeah, I know it's incredible, right? So then I went through the list of Hollywood, you know, cinema personalities who were actually born in 1923, and I got 3 to share with you.
Okay.
August 29th, 1923, Richard Attenborough was born.
Oh, okay. Nice.
John Hammond from Jurassic Park. He played Santa Claus, among many other classic roles. October 4th, 1923, Charlton Heston was born.
Okay.
Who would go on to play in the remake of, you know, the 10 Commandments. And on December 12th, 1923, a guy you know from Happy Gilmore fame, Bob Barker.
Oh, no way. That's awesome. You know, Bob Barker was so good in Happy Gilmore, but also The Price is Right. I remember I used to, like, whenever I would call in sick, when my mom would call in sick at school, I would always watch The Price is Right in the morning. Like, it was so much fun when I stayed home sick, even though I'm technically sick, although I wasn't always sick. But that's awesome. Yeah, Price is Right. Still going, which is wild.
Yep. And then, you know, there's a lot of old time actors who made their debut in the year 1923, but probably the most famous is Douglas Fairbanks Jr., the son of Douglas Fairbanks Sr. So there you go. That's a little bit of what the world was like in 1923. And I got to thinking, what do you think the world is going to be like in 100 years from now? The world of cinema specifically. Have you ever really pondered that?
I mean, the first question I would have for you is, do you think cinemas and the theater going experience will still be around? Because it really hasn't changed all that much. You know, there's now there's like stadium seating where, there's just more room between people. So someone tall in front of you doesn't block your view or anything. They've added some, gourmet food options, other than like popcorn and candy. And then maybe some theaters these days have a bar and you can buy booze. But otherwise, I mean, the theater going experience, right? The screens have gotten bigger. We have the IMAX format. They have Dolby sound and, all these different elements. You expect that to improve over time. And I would expect to see that as well. But I am curious if just screen, seat, audience, another 100 years, is that still going to be there? That's pretty wild. I hope it is. I love going to the movies.
I think it will be. I mean, I'm assuming that during the 20s, at the height of cinema here, people probably expected stage production that was going to be on its way out, right? They're like, who's going to go see actors on a stage when you could just watch them on a screen? And,
radio
still go to the traditional theater. We still read books. We still listen to the radio. Despite these advances in new technology, they're sometimes slower to truly change things, I think, than we always anticipate them being.
Well, and the other thing too is the movie going experience is so much more than simply just the movies. It's a shared experience. For one, you often don't go to the movies alone, except you. But
except for me, everybody.
Yeah, you go all the time. But I mean, most people are generally, right, they're calling up their friends, they're going on a date. It's an experience, right? Nobody was probably like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go see Avengers Endgame alone. You're like, oh, who loves Marvel? Like, let's get them to go.
Yeah.
And then movies are more than just sitting there and watching the thing, right? Like, there are dates and there's dinner and a movie. There's the whole, like, parents drop kids off at the movies, so they're like, don't have to watch them for the afternoon or, like, go to the movies and get out of here.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they're just the movies. I don't think it's going to go away, but CP, we did talk about this and we have seen the future. And for at least the solo viewing, movie viewing experience, something like the Apple Vision Pro is literally almost here. And I do think that for some viewing that's isolated, whether you're on an airplane, whether you're just at home by yourself, we will see this introduction to movies in VR. And I do think, right, that will be a big deal. And I think movies themselves may be filmed in different formats to allow for this. So, like, I think Apple already has the ability in their new iPhones to take like 3D video. There's, kind of 360 video and this sort of immersive experience where I do think, as far as like movies, we may experience them differently in ways that can only be done with certain technology. So I do think that will change and there'll be new experiences that we consider movies,
Yeah.
But generally, I mean, we're talking about storytelling here. Storytelling's not going anywhere. People love to be entertained, and people like to be entertained for roughly 2 hours. So
no. And I think, I mean, I don't know about you. There's not a lot of movies from the 20s that I watch regularly, right? In film class, you watch some of those old movies from the 1890s and the early 1900s. But for the most part, it's kind of been lost. But I think part of the reason why they've been lost also is not so much on a consumer end. I think a lot of it is because so much of those original films have deteriorated to such an aspect, right?
Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't until the 70s and the 80s that Hollywood really started putting attention into detail to preserving and restoring old films. Scorsese and Spielberg have really been leaders in this field, and the early digitization of film to make sure that it was going to be preserved for future generations. So while we might not be watching a lot of 1923 films, I think in 100 years from now, our great grandkids might be watching 2023 films because they're going to live on the internet and in new technology just because they have been digitized.
Yeah, and then there's literally the classics. So you have The Wizard of Oz, right? I think The Wizard of Oz will be watched 100 years from now. It's almost like something that gets passed down. right? Like it's a story that sure it can be remade, but the original is such a classic and a, cultural touchstone, kind of like Star Wars. Like I think Star Wars will probably be watched, and Disney can remake it, they can sell it, they can do all this, but the original Star Wars has so much charm and did so much for the industry that I think there will be movies that will still be watched 100 years from now.
Well, I mean, again, I did you ever see the movie Metropolis? It's not technically from 23, it's from 27.
We watched it in film school.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And I mean, again, it's not from 23, but it is a film that people still watch. You can still find it on HBO Max. You can, still watch it to this day. So I have no doubt in my mind that people will still be watching films. The experience may be different, but they'll still be watching movies. And they might even be watching some of the ones much older than 100 years. The other thing too is they're actually going to get to see something that I'm very jealous of. Robert Rodriguez's film 100 Years, which he shot with John Malkovich in 2015, and it is in a vault and will not be unlocked until 100 years from 2015. So
I don't know. CP, you and we might still be around, dude. I don't know. Like medical advancements and technology over the next 100 years, who knows? We might still be here. We'll be old men going to the movie theaters, and if we're lucky, we'll still be doing this podcast. So
we'll definitely, we might be in like 10,000 episodes by then.
Yeah, right. Like that would be pretty sweet. So if they're still making movies, we'll keep talking about them. And there's that. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think just storytelling in general, movies are kind of the grandest mode of storytelling that can reach the masses. And right now, I just don't see that changing in any major way. It's still, and then it's an artistic art form. So, as technology advances, as, is the case right now, like there's AI, it's going to free up a lot of people to not do mundane tasks. And we might see people be more creative and we might get more movies than ever,
Well, I do think you make a really good point, which is, in the worst case scenario, if 100 years in the future, everyone is living off their UBI, living in their government housing, the stacks.
You gotta do something.
Yeah, spending all their time in VR. I mean, they're going to have to watch movies. What else is there to do?
I can't wait till you and I hang out in VR and go watch movies together. Because now it's like, it's so fun when we do get together and we're like, let's go to the movies. But we go watch movies together every day if this VR thing pans out,
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, that would be pretty sweet. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm excited. I think the technology aspect, as far as just movies and storytelling, will advance in new and creative ways. But honestly, I think theaters will be around. I just do. I don't know if there'll be a theater in every city, but in major sort of metropolitan places, I think there definitely will be. And people are always going to want to see whatever the newest thing is,
Mm-hmm.
That's hype. That's the fun of it. Like,
yeah,
I want to go.
No, you're right, dude. You're right.
So should be pretty cool. I mean, I don't know. Hopefully AMC's still around. I'll keep my A list.
Yeah, me too.
For the next 100 years.
Me too, man.
So that'll be pretty tight. But all right. Well, one of the things that you actually brought up during this segment was that Walt Disney Studios, or the Disney Brothers Studios, and Warner Brothers were both founded in 1923. So 100 years ago. Well, we wanted to take a second then and acknowledge that, over that time, they've made a lot of movies.
They've made a lot of movies.
Yeah, a lot of great movies, classics that probably will be around in 100 years. But anyway, on that note, usually, one of our last segments on each of the podcast episodes is maybe a list or some sort of a breakdown of a list. But I think this time we wanted to take a look at our top Warner, our favorite Warner Brothers movies and our favorite Disney movies. So I'm gonna throw it over to you. We'll start with Warner Brothers, I guess. And what are your favorite Warner Brothers movies since they're now turning 100?
Okay, this is tough because when you start really going back through the 100 years of Warner Brothers,
it's a lot of movies.
They've had a lot of great ones. So these are 5 that I have that I think are pretty spectacular. Number 5 from 1987, Lethal Weapon.
Ooh, that is a classic. Spawn, a franchise, and Mel Gibson's haircut was just incredible.
Hey, man, mullets were the thing back then. Number 4.
Too old for this shit.
That's actually that's one of those movies that you look at and you're like, it's really amazing. Like the people involved at all levels. Dick Donner is the director. Yeah. Shane Black is the screenwriter. You're like, what? Like, I don't know. It's just always amazing when you see these movies that looking back, you're like, yeah, there's a reason why that all worked. Everything was in place. Number 4 from 2008, The Dark Knight by Christopher Nolan. I mean,
that's on my list. Movie
probably ever. I know. I was hoping there wasn't going to be overlap, but let's not kid ourselves. There's going to be a little bit of overlap. Number 3,
Dark Knight's on my list. Yeah,
from 2021, my new favorite movie, Dune.
Oh, nice. That's a good pick.
Well, I mean, it was pretty incredible, and I think it will live on as one of the truly legendary films that Warner Brothers has been able to produce. Number 2, Goodfellas from 1990, and number 1, what I consider to be the greatest film of all time, 1942, Casablanca.
Also, legendary pick. That's a movie that's going to be watched in 100 years. I would put money on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
I'm surprised you didn't have the Barbie movie.
Well, I didn't want there to be too much overlap.
I thought that would make your list.
I thought you were going to put it on your list, so I figured I'd just leave that one off. Yeah.
Well, I didn't put it on mine because I thought you were going to put it on yours.
Well, you see, what do you expect, man?
All right. Well, I did have a couple honorable mentions. So I did want to throw out just like all of Christopher Nolan's movies that he made for Warner Brothers are incredible. Like his whole filmography is just excellent. Shawshank Redemption, which is, often considered one of the greatest movies of all time. Batman 89, which easily probably could have made my list, but the Tim Burton Batmans were incredible. Twister, which I always loved because of the experience at the ride at Universal, which is ironic, but it was Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And Space Jam, which, I had to at least incorporate an acknowledgement of all the Looney Tunes, which they have that famous, intro with WB. And then Superman, which I'm still waiting on, the truly great Superman film, but who knows, one day. So number 5, I'm going with The Goonies, a childhood classic that I still enjoy. And yeah, it's definitely one that is probably, nostalgia, tinted because I just grew up loving that movie. But I think it actually holds up fairly well. It's still pretty fun. And I would guess kids they would still like The Goonies. Yeah. So number 4 on my list, because it has one of my all-time favorite scenes in a movie, is Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, Michael Mann. And they have that shootout downtown LA. And it is intense. To this day, I put it on and it just rocks my living room. I mean, and it commands your attention. Like once it hits, once the guns start going, like you can't not look at it.
Yeah.
You're like, it's that good. Number 3, CP. I knew this wouldn't make your list, so I put it on mine. But I'm just going to say Harry Potter. I love Harry Potter. I love the Harry Potter movies. And I don't know. I thought the series did pretty well, but I don't want to break down Harry Potter right now. I know you're supposed to marathon it, and then maybe we'll talk about it on a future episode. But I thought, if Warner Brothers did one thing right, Harry Potter, it's they cast everybody so well. I thought it looks great visually, but really they hit a home run with the cast, and it made stars out of all of them, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Number 2 is one of my all-time favorite movies, and this is just the first one in the series, but The Matrix, which we have broken down on this podcast, so you can go back and check that out for my more in-depth thoughts, but incredible movie and one of my faves. And then number 1, as I mentioned, it made my list too, CP, is The Dark Knight, which is my favorite Nolan film and one of my favorite movies all time. And a shout out to Anthony. It is the best Batman movie. So he loves the Batman. But yeah, Dark Knight. So that does it for Warner Brothers, and let's flip over to Disney.
You forgot to put down Mad Max Fury Road on your listy, man. That's definitely should have been on there.
You know, I did want to acknowledge too that you brought this up, and I think we should talk about it. Lord of the Rings is not on here. And the reasoning is that it was distributed by New Line Cinema, and New Line is today a subsidiary of Warner Brothers. So technically, Lord of the Rings is a Warner Brothers film. That purchase of New Line happened in 2008, which is after Lord of the Rings, and we decided to omit that. Even though obviously we've talked Lord of the Rings on the show, like
Lord of the Rings,
yeah, incredible. So let's swap it over to Disney now. I'm gonna throw it over to you. Who do you have? What movies do you have for Disney? Because this is a different take now. It's just a different. It's like family vibe now.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with number 5 from 1995, Toy Story. That started Pixar classic. And the entire style of animation.
And that movie's still good. I watched it, and it is still amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it just plays well. I don't know. Great. It's like a all-time classic.
Yep. And incredible voice acting, beloved characters. People love it. There's a reason why they made, 3 sequels. Number 4, I wanted to add something live action to the list, which actually was much harder than I was anticipating when you really see all the number of films that Disney made. So I went with Remember the Titans from 2000. And that's just, I love that movie. I watch it like once a month. My brother and I quote those lines all the time. So that's what I went with.
You know what? It's full MCP. I might actually put on Remember the Titans. That's a good one.
I think it's a good one. Number 3 from 1953. This is animated because it's Disney. Peter Pan.
Ooh, that's a Disney classic right there.
Yeah, I've always loved that one. It's one of my favorite animated ones, and along with the top 2 on my list. So number 2 is Pinocchio from 1940, which we have talked about on this podcast as well.
Yeah, I do prefer that version to the new version, and we did a movie remake and you can go check that out for our thought. But yeah, the original is where it's at.
And I just remember when we talked about in that movie remake time, the original just. Again, this is a hand-drawn movie, and there's so much beauty in it because of the attention to detail that you get in the art, and that's not something that exists anymore. We have animation still, but not hand-drawn like Pinocchio and Peter Pan. And then the number 1 movie on my list is kind of the last iteration of that, and that's Beauty and the Beast from 1991. In my opinion, probably Disney's greatest animated movie. I mean, it wasn't nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture. It's pretty freaking good.
I think to this day it might still be the only animated movie ever nominated, or at least hand-drawn animation for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I wanted to give some honorable mentions just to the movie that kicked off the Disney Renaissance, The Little Mermaid, or the one that was the most successful of the kickoff, because I think they technically had a couple in there. And then I did want to acknowledge Heavyweights, which is not what you would think, but is actually like a really great movie. And they don't make a lot of movies like that anymore, like for kids like that, at least not theatrically. Like, Disney Channel kind of took that over with the Disney Channel original movies, and you probably see that with streaming. But for theatrical experiences and all that, you don't see as many of those. And that was one I loved as a kid. And, Disney's all about that. So number 5 on my list is a holiday classic, The Santa Claus with Tim Allen, which I have to thank you for reminding me to include the Christmas movies because they are some of my favorites. And I also just want to acknowledge, like, when you create a holiday classic, I'm going to watch it every year.
Yeah.
So well done, Disney. Number on my list is actually just one of my all-time favorite sports movies, and that's The Mighty Ducks.
Ooh.
So again, kids movie, but very, very fun. And I think the movie, I still cheer every time they score that first goal. Like, it's like uplifting. You're like, finally, these kids, they're going to do it. You can just feel it.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny. Number 3 is kind of like The Matrix on the other list. Is honestly, this movie is just so much fun. I can't imagine anybody seeing it and not liking it. Is Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. I mean, it has sword fights and pirate ships and pirate ghosts and just treasure, everything. It has anything associated with that genre. Yeah, it's like, and it's just awesome. And it's probably the most successful movie, or at least franchise, Disney has ever done based on a ride.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, the first one, is just, I love it. I think it's perfect. It has nods to the ride and everything. It's excellent.
Yep. No, it's a great.
Now we're going animated, CP. These are my two favorite animated films, both from the Disney Renaissance. Even though, like you said, I do love the classics as well. I grew up right in that generation. Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. My number 2, Aladdin.
Ooh, okay.
Which is an excellent animated movie. And again, I prefer to the live action remake. And same thing with my number 1. And this is, honestly, I just put this on last weekend. I just watched this movie, The Lion King.
Yeah, both of those are great.
I can watch, I sing the songs still. I love the characters. They're all so memorable. And the stories are they're awesome. And yeah, The Lion King that was my favorite, I think. So that and Aladdin. They're 1 and 2. I love both of those probably equally. But yeah, those are just my favorites. But, this was fun to list these movies because it's weird. Like, 5 movies to encompass 100 years. You're like, there's so many movies you could dive into. And these are the ones that we grew up with. But, I guess happy 100 years to Warner Brothers and Walt Disney Studios. It's quite an honor. Now, CP, just like I did with the other lists when I talked about Lord of the Rings, I did want to acknowledge here top Disney movies of all time. I omitted Marvel, Star Wars, and Pixar from my list because I feel like each of those, right, can be their own list.
Yeah. And I saw you admitted all the stuff that Disney acquired with the Fox merger and things like that. That was all excluded from the conversation.
Exactly. So I was going with Disney produced movies at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I could have picked Disney Star Wars, but
you could have.
We already made that joke, CP. Well, anyway, see, that does it for our episode this week. It was a little bit of a different format, but it was fun. It was fun to talk about the history of a little bit and maybe, what the future looks like. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in and, celebrating 100 episodes with us.
100 episodes. Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're on our way to 1,000. And
maybe 10,000.
Yeah, it's just time. And hopefully, like I said, those medical advancements will allow CP and I to talk about movies for another 100 years. That would be incredible. But anyway, yes, thank you all so much for tuning in and supporting the show for 100 episodes. Hope you guys really enjoyed this episode and are looking forward to what we have in store for the future. So should be a lot of fun. And you could follow the show at filmmakerscompass.com or at Film Comp Podcast on social media, but at filmmakerscompass.com, we have a feed of all of our episodes and links to all of our social media. So be sure to check that out. You can follow me at Big Kid D-Man and CP.
You can follow me at NDCal5. Thank you for hanging out and celebrating the big 100 with D-Man and I. And send us your lists. Let us know what your favorite movies from 100 years of Warner Brothers and 100 years of Disney were. We would love to know your thoughts because there's a bunch of movies we left off that are great ones. In the meantime, keep watching movies, and we will see you back here next week for episode 101.